Cosul Shantakumane, August 17, 2022. On Saturday, July 8, 2006, at approximately 1:10 p.m., Andy Lilliston and his wife entered a model home in McKinney, a suburb of Dallas. Lilliston noticed signs that the house had been disturbed and saw a large pool of blood in the dining room near the sales desk. Following a trail of blood into the kitchen, he found a woman's body lying face up on the floor. Lilliston and his wife called 911, exited the home, and flagged down a vehicle for assistance. Lilliston then returned briefly to check the body for signs of life but found none, waiting outside for emergency personnel to arrive. Texas Ranger A.P. Davidson observed signs of a struggle, including displaced furniture and a knocked-over potted plant. He found a pair of women's shoes, a broken hair clip, and a broken earring on the floor. The victim, Sarah Walker, a real estate agent, had multiple stab wounds, and the positioning of her skirt and the trail of blood suggested she had been dragged from the dining room to the kitchen. McKinney police officer Pete Copen noted a partial bloody fingerprint on the front door's deadbolt and found additional blood on the potted plant stand, the full cord for the front window blinds, and the wall section between the window and the door. He also observed what appeared to be diluted blood residue in the kitchen sink. Collin County Medical Examiner William Rohr testified that Walker suffered multiple blunt force injuries to her face and head, consistent with being struck multiple times with the plant stand. She had a total of 33 stab wounds, including 10 that penetrated vital organs and blood vessels. She also had a bite mark on the back of her neck, likely inflicted at or near the time of her death, and defensive injuries, including a broken fingernail. Walker's ex-husband, Randy Tate, testified that he had seen her that morning and noted a new Rolex watch she had purchased the previous day. A search of her home after her death revealed the box and receipt for the watch, but the watch itself was missing. Surveillance video from a bank shortly afterward showed Walker wearing a watch and a ring. Another real estate agent, Mamie Sharpless, testified that she arrived to show a townhouse in McKinney between 11:30 a.m. and noon. While waiting with her husband, Nelson Villavicencio, they observed a white Ford Mustang drive by and park across from a model home. The driver exited and crossed the street, claiming he was not the buyer she was expecting. Sharpless later identified the man in court as Shantakumane. Sharpless and Villavicencio drove around the block and returned to the townhouse to await their showing. During this time, they saw Walker arrive at the model home in her Porsche and enter the home, with the Mustang now parked in front. After Sharpless completed the showing, they left the subdivision. Walker called her cousin, Jessica Allen, around 12:30 p.m., speaking for about 15 minutes before saying someone had walked in and that she would call back. Roughly half an hour later, Andy Lilliston discovered her body. Walker was not wearing the watch or ring seen on the surveillance video, and the watch was never recovered. Sharpless and Villavicencio's description of the suspect matched Shantakumane, who had been involved in an incident with another female real estate agent the night before Walker's murder. That agent testified that Shantakumane had previously sought her help finding an apartment and later came to her home, banging on the doors and requesting to use her phone, prompting her to call the police. DNA analysis was conducted on blood evidence from the crime scene and on the scrapings from Walker's fingernails. After the results were received, police arrested Shantakumane, then 25, at his apartment on September 5. Officer Randall Norton interviewed Shantakumane at the McKinney police station. He initially denied ever being in McKinney in a white Mustang, but later stated that his car had broken down in front of a model home, that he had knocked on the door but received no answer, and that he took a few steps inside to see if anyone was there. He claimed he spoke to a man and woman in a car, entered the kitchen for a drink of water but left because he did not know how to operate the faucet, and suggested that any blood observed could have come from pre-existing cuts on his hands. Ranger Davidson testified that Shantakumane owned a white Ford Mustang and that his bank account was overdrawn by $82.27 the day before Walker's murder. Court documents also indicated that he had phoned Sharpless about the townhouse showing the morning of the murder. Forensic dentistry consultant Brent Hudson examined impressions of Shantakumane's teeth and compared them to bite marks on Walker's neck, concluding within reasonable dental certainty beyond a doubt that Shantakumane was the source. Shantakumane's defense attorney, Keith Gore, told jurors that Shantakumane intended to rob Walker and the situation escalated, resulting in her death. Shanta Kumane had previously served time in North Carolina for aggravated kidnapping and robbery and was on parole at the time of Walker's murder. A jury found Shanta Kumane guilty of capital murder in October 2007 and sentenced him to death. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals upheld the conviction and sentence in April 2010. He had two prior scheduled execution dates in 2017, both rescheduled due to challenges to his conviction. Appeals disputed the use of hypnosis on Sharpless and Villavicencio, the admissibility of DNA and bite mark evidence, and claimed his attorney admitted guilt against his wishes. A new evidentiary hearing concluded the bite mark testimony would not be admissible under current standards, but the DNA evidence remained valid, and the hypnosis did not materially affect the witnesses' descriptions. The CCA confirmed that the convictions would stand even without the bite mark evidence. Further appeals challenging DNA evidence were denied after testing of previously unexamined samples in 2021. Shanta Kumane's mother attended the execution. No members of Walker's family were present. He began his final statement. "I want to thank Jesus Christ, my supporters, and the prison ministers for aiding me in my journey. To Mrs. Walker's family, I pray my death will bring you peace. Mom, I love you." His mother waved and replied, "I love you." The lethal injection was then administered, and he was pronounced dead at 6:33 p.m. John Henry Ramirez, October 5, 2022. In July 2004, Cristina Chavez, 24, and Angela Rodriguez, 30, who lived together in San Antonio, traveled to Corpus Christi to visit Rodriguez's family for the weekend. While there, Rodriguez snuck her friend, John Ramirez, 20, into her mother's house because her mother did not want him there. Ramirez carried a ridged knife. When discovered, he was kicked out, but returned later with Rodriguez's sister, Roberta Garcia. Later, Chavez, Rodriguez, and Ramirez went to a friend's house and spent 3 to 4 days drinking and using drugs, pawning items to buy more. Chavez testified that when they ran out of drugs and money, they decided to rob someone to get cash. Only Ramirez had a weapon. They got into two maroon vans. Chavez drove one with Rodriguez as a passenger, and Ramirez drove the other. On Monday, July 19, 2004, Lydia Salinas managed the Times Market convenience store in Corpus Christi. She was working with Pablo Castro, 46, and arranged for her sister-in-law to bring dinner since Castro had only $1. A short time later, a young woman entered to use the restroom, later identified as Rodriguez. Chavez testified that Ramirez and Rodriguez approached Castro in the parking lot. Ramirez used the knife to stab him while Rodriguez did not attack but went through his pockets afterward, taking the $1.25. Both had blood on them and sought a place to clean up. Witnesses Mariano Cervantes and Kashif But saw the altercation, describing a man in his 40s being attacked by a young man and woman. After the victim fell, the assailants took items from him and fled in a red Ford van with a second van possibly involved. Salinas then saw Castro lying in the parking lot, bleeding from a severe throat wound, and called 911. Officer Mike Wenzel arrived to find Castro unresponsive, bleeding from stab and slashing wounds to the neck. He collected descriptions of the assailants and their escape vehicle. Chavez testified that after taking the $1.25 from Castro, the group still lacked money for drugs, committing an aggravated robbery and an attempted robbery shortly afterward. Ramirez drove the van into a brushy area and the three fled on foot. Chavez and Rodriguez were arrested, but Ramirez escaped. April Metting and Ruby Hinojosa later testified to similar attempts by Ramirez and Rodriguez at fast food drive-thrus involving threats with a knife and theft. Metting's and Hinojosa's descriptions linked Ramirez to the crimes. Officer James Gray and Officer Michael Frakes pursued a red van matching the suspect's description but initially lost it. The van was later found abandoned, with the engine still warm, and Officer Ralph Vasquez found and arrested Chavez and Rodriguez, whose clothes were bloody and soiled. Roberta Garcia testified that Ramirez returned after midnight on July 20, covered in grass and dirt with a bleeding hand, claiming they had stabbed someone and that the police were chasing him. Evidence collected from the van included April Metting's wallet and credit card, blood on the door handle, steering wheel, gear shift, and items inside, with DNA matching Pablo Castro. DNA from the van and items matched Ramirez, and Castro's DNA was found on Rodriguez's jeans. The medical examiner testified that Castro had 29 sharp object wounds across his body, as well as blunt force trauma to the face and neck. Ramirez evaded arrest for 4 years, spending time in Mexico and eventually returning to Texas, where he was arrested near Brownsville on February 20, 2008. Ramirez had prior U.S. Marine Court martial convictions and a prior arrest for Mary Jane possession and carrying a weapon. A jury convicted him of capital murder in December 2008 and sentenced him to death. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals affirmed the conviction in March 2011. He was also convicted of evading arrest and 2 counts of aggravated robbery. Rodriguez pleaded guilty to murder and 2 counts of aggravated robbery, receiving 2 life sentences and a 20-year sentence. Chavez pleaded guilty to aggravated robbery and was sentenced to 25 years. Both women remain in custody. Ramirez initially waived appeals after the Court of Criminal Appeals affirmed his death sentence in 2011, then resumed them to establish a relationship with a half-sister. A reporter noted that Ramirez, interviewed in 2017 shortly before his first scheduled execution, had become more reflective and remorseful. He described his actions as being driven by extreme intoxication and remorse, stating to his son, "Don't be nothing like me, man." His initial execution dates were postponed due to attorney changes, the pandemic, and Supreme Court intervention over religious rights. When the state was prepared to execute Ramirez, the district attorney requested withdrawal of the death warrant on ethical grounds, but the victim's children petitioned to proceed, and the court denied the request. Ramirez addressed Castro's 4 children during his final statement, with Dana Moore, his pastor, beside him. "I just want to say to the family of Pablo Castro, I appreciate everything that y'all did to try and communicate with me through the Victims Advocacy Program. I tried to reply back, but there is nothing that I could have said or done that would have helped you. I have regret and remorse. This is such a heinous act. I hope this finds you comfort. If this helps you, then I'm glad. I hope in some shape or form this helps you find closure. To my wife, my friends, my son, Grasshopper, Dana, and homies, I love y'all. Just know that I fought a good fight and I am ready to go. I am ready, Warden." The lethal injection was then administered and Ramirez was pronounced dead at 6:41 p.m. Tracy Lane Beatty, November 9, 2022. In September 2003, Beatty, 42, was paroled after serving a 15-year sentence for vehicle theft. In early October, he moved in with his mother, Caroline Click, 62, who lived in a trailer in White House near Tyler. Betty McCarthy, Click's neighbor and friend, testified that Click had initially been happy for Beatty to move in, despite having been assaulted by him in the past. However, sometime in October, Click asked him to leave, saying, "I put up with all I'm going to put up with." Leanna Wilkerson, who lived across the road, testified that Click had been hopeful she and Beatty could repair their relationship despite prior assaults, including one severe beating. Wilkerson hired Beatty, who was unemployed, to do odd jobs and also saw him at her home when he and Click argued, which was daily. In late October and early November, Beatty house sat for Wilkerson while she was out of town. Upon her return, she found his suitcase in the living room. Beatty said his mother had packed his things and brought them over. Despite this, he returned to live with Click. Beatty and Click fought daily in November. In mid-November, Beatty told Wilkerson he had missed an important job interview because Click refused to drive him or let him use her car. Around this time, he recounted a fight where he was holding a hammer while underpinning the house and said, "All I could think about was hitting her in the head with it." He told Wilkerson, "Well, I couldn't do it. If I shoved her under there, she would have just started stinking." Wilkerson initially thought he was joking, but he had repeatedly said he wanted to choke her and shut her up. On November 25, 2 days before Thanksgiving, McCarthy visited Click at 4 p.m. and found her stressed and crying. She said she had asked Beatty to leave again. Beatty's cousin, Stacy Kilo, testified that Beatty arrived between 5 and 5:30 p.m., driving Click's car, smelled of alcohol, and told her Click was out of town. He stayed briefly, and the drive from Click's home took about 45 minutes. Around 6:30 p.m., Beatty went to Wilkerson's house for dinner and stayed until about 10 p.m., later giving her a turkey, saying Click had gone out of town with a man named Junior. Beatty then used Click's credit cards and bank accounts until depleted, mainly on drugs and alcohol. He was jailed in Henderson County on theft charges, where he began telling inmates about murdering his mother and requested investigators to lead him to her body, so it could be getting her out of the hole before Christmas. On December 23, cadaver dogs found Click's nude, contorted body in a shallow grave behind her home. Beatty had attempted to mask the smell with cat litter, mothballs, and garlic. Her face and neck were wrapped in pantyhose. She had been strangled, beaten, and suffered broken bones and head trauma. Beatty gave conflicting accounts of her death, sometimes blaming Junior or a hired friend, and sometimes claiming he choked her after she pulled a gun. Wilkerson testified that Beatty's final story was that after leaving her house on November 25, he returned home, fought with Click, and choked her until she fell. He realized she was dead the next morning. Beatty had prior convictions, including injury to a child, 4 years in 1987, paroled after 8 months, a 15-year sentence for vehicle theft, paroled in 1991, aggravated assault on a correctional officer, and misdemeanors for weapon possession and controlled substances, totaling 21 arrests. Under Texas law, a first-degree murder qualifies as capital murder if aggravating factors exist, including committing another felony, such as burglary. The prosecution argued that Beatty entered his mother's home without consent on the day of her murder, satisfying the burglary element. In August 2004, a jury found him guilty of capital murder and sentenced him to death. Beatty's lawyers challenged the burglary element in state and federal appeals, arguing Click had previously allowed him to stay after asking him to leave. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals upheld the conviction and sentence. Execution dates were postponed multiple times, in 2015 due to appeals, in March 2020 due to the pandemic shutdowns, and other states due to mental competency and attorney changes. Weeks before his execution, Beatty told a reporter from death row that killing his mother was an accident. He said he had been drinking all day, tried to leave a confrontation, but Click grabbed him by the hair, leading him to strangle her. He believed she was just unconscious and realized she was dead the next morning. He cleaned the body, left it for 3 days, then dug a grave behind the house and buried her, noting she had wanted to be buried there. He did not appear remorseful. Beatty's ex-wife, 2 daughters, his pen pal wife Moran, married 2 weeks earlier, and the spiritual advisor attended the execution. He made no apologies or references to his crime in his last statement. He told his wife, "I don't want to leave you, baby. See you when you get there. I love you. Thank you to all my brothers back on the unit for all the encouragement to help get my life right. Sonny, Blue, I love you, brothers. See you on the other side." The lethal injection was administered and Beatty was pronounced dead at 6:39 p.m. Stephen Dale Barbie, November 16, 2022. Lisa Underwood owned a bagel shop in Fort Worth. In the fall of 2003, she began a personal relationship with Stephen Barbie, a man who had previously been a customer at her shop. Barbie was married at the time. Their relationship ended at the end of 2003, and Underwood began seeing another man. By July 2004, she resumed seeing Barbie and became pregnant. She informed both men about her pregnancy and told Barbie that she believed he was the father. Underwood's employee, Holly Pills, planned to host a baby shower for her on Saturday, February 18, 2005. Pills testified that Underwood, who was 34 years old and 7 months pregnant at the time, stayed home from work that day before the shower because she had a cold. Underwood later told Pills that she was feeling better and was excited about the baby shower, planning to arrive at the bagel shop shortly before 4 p.m. At 3 a.m. on February 19, Denton County Deputy Sheriff David Bronner stopped a man walking along the service road of Interstate Highway 35. It had been cold and rainy, and the man's clothes were very wet and covered in mud. When Browner asked for identification, the man claimed he had left his wallet at a nearby friend's house and provided a false name and date of birth. While Browner verified the information, the man suddenly ran into a thickly wooded area. Officers searched for several hours, but eventually lost him. Underwood did not attend her baby shower, prompting authorities to check her home. Police found no signs of forced entry, but neither Underwood nor her 7-year-old son Jaden were present. Blood was visible on the entertainment center, walls, and other items in the living room, and it appears that someone had attempted to clean or conceal a bloodstain on the floor. Underwood's car was missing, and there was blood on the garage floor. Jaden's glasses were found next to his bed. Investigators also found that Underwood had used her home computer for about 40 minutes around midnight. On February 2001, Underwood's Dodge SUV was located in a creek near Interstate 35 in Denton County. The front end of the vehicle was submerged in water, with the remainder sticking out. Cleaning solution was found inside the vehicle, and Underwood's keys and purse were recovered nearby. The car's location was approximately 300 yards from the site where Deputy Browner had encountered the unidentified man. Browner later identified Barbie as the man from a photo lineup. Detectives Michael Carroll, John McCaskill, and Brian Jamieson of the Fort Worth Police Department traveled to Tyler to speak with Barbie, then 37, his wife Trish Barbie, and coworker Ron Dodd, 33, in a Walmart parking lot. After some initial conversation, all three were brought to the Tyler Police Department for further questioning. Carroll and Jamieson interviewed Barbie in one room, while McCaskill interviewed Dodd in another. Barbie initially told investigators that he worked cutting trees on February 19. He said he drove home to Fort Worth that evening, then went to Dodd's house to work on a truck used for their business, leaving around 2 or 3 a.m. He claimed to have slept on the couch at home so as not to disturb his wife. He acknowledged having dated Underwood and that she had told him he might be the father of her unborn child, but claimed he had not seen or heard from her for some time. Eventually, he admitted being stopped by law enforcement in Denton County around 3 a.m., providing a false name and running away. During the investigation, Officer Carroll excused himself to observe McCaskill's interview with Dodd. While Carroll was gone, Barbie asked to use the restroom, and they had an unrecorded conversation lasting 45 to 60 minutes. During this time, Carroll warned Barbie that Dodd was going to lay this whole thing in Barbie's lap and reminded him that Underwood's family needed closure. Barbie admitted that he and Dodd had devised a plan to murder Underwood because she intended to put his name on a birth certificate or otherwise threaten his family and marital relationship. Barbie explained that Dodd drove him to Underwood's home, leaving him there. He said he tried to provoke a fight but initially failed. He called Dodd to pick him up and return him later, at which point he was able to upset Underwood enough to initiate a physical altercation. Barbie stated that he wrestled her to the ground and held her face into the carpet until she stopped breathing. Jaden entered the room crying, and Barbie placed his hand over the child's mouth and nose until he stopped breathing. Afterward, Barbie attempted to clean the house and cover a bloodstain with a piece of furniture. He then placed the victims' bodies in Underwood's car, drove to a road off Farm to Market Road 407, and using a shovel provided by Dodd, buried them in a shallow grave covered with debris. He subsequently drove Underwood's car to another location near the creek. During subsequent interviews, Barbie directed authorities to the burial site where both bodies were recovered. The medical examiner determined that Lisa Underwood died of traumatic asphyxiation, with additional injuries including a broken arm, abrasions and contusions on her face, and bruises on both sides of her back. Jaden Underwood died of asphyxia by smothering and had a large bruise above his right temple from some form of impact. Additional bruises and abrasions were noted on his back, arm, hip, and leg, and pressure had been applied to his lips and gums. DNA testing confirmed that Barbie was not the father of Underwood's unborn child. Teresa Barbie, Stephen Barbie's ex-wife, testified that during their marriage from 1996 to 2003, he had physically assaulted her on multiple occasions. In one incident, she suffered a serious concussion, and while she was bleeding and unconscious, he sat in another room eating ice cream. When she awoke, he had her drive herself to the hospital. Teresa also testified that she was dating Ron Dodd at the time of the Underwood's murders. She recounted Dodd leaving her house with Barbie late on February 18 and returning alone, followed shortly by Barbie and Dodd together. Early on February 19, she overheard a call from Barbie asking Dodd to come and help him. Over time, Barbie repeatedly changed his story, at one point attempting to frame Dodd as the sole perpetrator. He even asked Teresa to testify that Dodd was the killer, at which point she left in tears and was removed from his visitors list. At trial, Barbie's attorneys argued that his confession was coerced and that no physical or forensic evidence tied him to the murders. Nevertheless, in February 2006, a jury found Barbie guilty of capital murder and sentenced him to death. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals affirmed the conviction in December 2008. Dodd pleaded guilty to tampering with evidence, a third-degree felony, and was sentenced to 10 years in prison, being released in March 2016. He has since been arrested twice and convicted of misdemeanor domestic assault. Barbie's appeals included claims that his Sixth Amendment right to effective counsel was violated when his attorney confessed his guilt without consent during closing arguments. Federal courts declined to overturn his conviction. Execution dates in 2019 and 2021 were stayed due to appeals and changes in Texas's policy regarding spiritual advisors in the death chamber. Barbie also raised concerns about his disability and how he would be strapped to the gurney, but the warden had stipulated that accommodations would be made. Barbie's execution on the rescheduled date began at 6 p.m. The insertion of IV lines was unusually difficult due to his inability to straighten his arms. The first line was placed in his hand and the second in his neck at 6:49 p.m. Lisa Underwood's mother and friends observed the execution from a viewing room while Barbie's spiritual advisor was present in the room. In his final statement, Barbie made no reference to his crimes or expressions of remorse. He instead delivered a short gospel message, thanked his minister, friends, and supporters, and expressed his desire to be at peace with Jesus. He stated, "I want everyone to have peace in their heart that only Jesus can give us. I'm ready to go home. I'm ready, warden. Send me home." The lethal injection was administered and he was pronounced dead at 7:35 p.m. Robert Allen Frata, January 10, 2023. Robert Frata worked as a public safety officer, a combined police officer and firefighter in Missouri City, Texas, southwest of Houston. He had 3 children with his wife Farah. In November 1992, Farah filed for divorce and the couple separated. According to testimony at trial, Robert wanted to stay married only if Farah agreed to an open marriage. During custody proceedings in March and April 1993, he did not seek primary custody but wanted joint authority over their children's medical and educational decisions. He also requested that Farah be restricted from moving the children beyond a 100-mile radius, a request Farah opposed. Over the following months, Robert grew increasingly bitter and resentful toward Farah. He complained to friends that child support left him broke and claimed that he wanted primary custody, so Farah would have to pay him instead. He also admitted that he believed Farah would win any custody dispute because her parents were wealthy. Robert reportedly told friends that he would not have to pay child support if he killed Farah. In December 1993, Farah gave a deposition in which she stated that Robert wanted her to participate in deviant sexual fetishes, including acts of asphyxiation, coprophilia, and urophilia daily. Robert later told a friend that her claims were false and insisted he did not want others to hear them. He began actively seeking someone to kill Farah, soliciting friends and acquaintances for recommendations or for direct involvement. More than a dozen of his gym workout buddies testified that Frata often spoke about wanting to get rid of his wife. Initially, they believed he was venting frustration, but over time, some took him seriously. One friend testified that Frata offered him $1,000 in advance and his Jeep for carrying out the murder. James Podorski, a fellow gym member, testified that Frata brought a gun when they went to topless clubs together. Podorski questioned whether it was wise for a police officer to carry a gun while drinking, to which Frata replied that the gun was in case we run into Farah, I'll shoot her myself and make it look like a carjacking. The Frata's divorce and custody trial was scheduled for November 28, 1994. On the evening of Wednesday, November 9, 1994, Frata, then 37, had dinner with Farah and their 3 children, aged 4 through 7, at a cafeteria. He then took the children to a Catholic church in Humble, north of Houston, leaving the 2 youngest in the nursery and taking the 7-year-old to catechism class. Frata attended a parent meeting for First Communion preparation, but repeatedly excused himself to make and receive telephone calls from the church office. Farah went to a hair salon before returning home around 8 p.m. Neighbors across the street witnessed events at her home. One neighbor reported hearing a gunshot, a scream, and observing Farah fall beside her car, followed by a second gunshot. A few minutes later, a man of short stature with a round head, either black or wearing black makeup, was seen near the house. Another neighbor described seeing either a white person with a stocking over their face or a black person. Shortly afterward, a silver or gray car with a burned-out headlight arrived, picked up the man, and quickly drove away. The neighbors called 911 and Farah was taken to the emergency room where she was pronounced dead. Her purse remained undisturbed. The press in Houston aired the 911 call from Laura Helcher, who witnessed the shooting. She reported that a black man dressed in black stood behind a tree near Farah, and a small silver Toyota or Honda hatchback with a broken headlight picked him up after the shooting. During the call, Helcher's husband Darren confirmed that Farah had been shot but was still alive. Robert Frata arrived at Farah's house with the children 30 to 40 minutes after police. One officer testified that Frata showed no signs of sadness or shock and was eager to expedite the investigation. A detective described him as confident, composed, and in command. Later that night, the detective interviewed Frata at the police station and found him deceptive. Frata consented to a search of his car, where police discovered a 9mm pistol and $1,050 in cash in a white envelope. After 14 hours at the homicide division, he was released. On November 10, a 70-minute video recorded Frata answering questions calmly while being interrogated by an off-screen male officer. He claimed that Farah had already been taken to the hospital by the time he arrived at her home and that she had a pulse but was in critical condition. Frata stated, "I would have never wanted anything like this to happen." He also referenced a prior robbery at Farah's house about 6 months earlier and speculated that Farah's boyfriend, present during the children's drop-off, might have been part of the scheme against him. Frata suggested Farah had shady family connections and theorized that what occurred in the garage may have been a plan she was orchestrating that backfired. During the interrogation, Frata said he loved Farah and never wanted the divorce, claiming there was a lack of romance and affection, but no extreme marital discord. He also mentioned owning a Jeep and that he had no life insurance on Farah. The video shows him rubbing his eyes and briefly sobbing during 3 moments when the officer left the room. James Podorsky testified that the day after the murder, Frata visited him at a tanning salon, instructing him to keep quiet and suggesting that Podorsky claimed he had accidentally grazed Farah with a bullet while trying to scare her. A few days later, Frata attempted to collect life insurance on Farah's policy. The investigation remained ongoing. On March 1, 1995, 18-year-old Howard Guidry was arrested for a bank robbery with 3 weapons, including a .38 caliber revolver purchased by Robert Frata in 1982. Mary Jipp, Guidry's neighbor, informed police of his involvement in Farah's murder. A firearms examiner confirmed that 1 bullet fragment from Farah's garage was fired from Frata's revolver. Another fragment was a possible match. Guidry confessed to Sergeant Danny Ray Billingsley, explaining that he and Joseph Pristash, 38, scouted Farah's house and the nearby payphone on November 9, 1994. Guidry was left at Farah's house with the revolver, climbed into the backyard playhouse, and waited. When Farah arrived, he shot her once in the head. When she continued moving, he shot her a second time. He then called Pristash, returned the revolver, and expected to be paid $1,000. Pristash also confessed, stating that the mobile phone used belonged to Mary Jipp. Guidry was to receive $1,000, while Pristash would receive a couple $1,000 and the Jeep for acting as the middleman and driver. At Frata's trial, Jipp testified that Pristash and Guidry had discussed the murder beforehand and that on the night of the crime, she saw Guidry dressed in black at her apartment steps. Pristash arrived shortly after, unloaded the gun, confirmed Farah was dead, and planned to meet Bob, Frata, to receive payment. Jipp retrieved shell casings and noted the gun's serial number, later disposing of the casings in a mall trash can. A gym manager testified that Pristash arrived at 9:35 p.m. on the night of the murder. The gym closed at 10 p.m. In April 1996, a jury found Frata guilty of capital murder. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals affirmed the conviction and death sentence in June 1999. Joseph Pristash and Howard Guidry were also convicted of capital murder and sentenced to death. Frata's conviction relied heavily on Pristash and Guidry's confessions and Jipp's testimony. Neither Pristash nor Guidry testified at his trial. While Texas courts deemed the hearsay evidence admissible, U.S. District Judge Melinda Harmon overturned the conviction, a decision later affirmed by the U.S. Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. Before this, in 2007, Frata wrote to Judge Harmon asking how to end his appeals and allow his execution, stating, "I would rather be killed than live in this daily torture and torment." Farah's parents, Lex and Betty Baker, adopted the children, Bradley, Daniel, and Amber. Amber later visited her father in jail, describing him as emotionless and attempting to advise her to seek Christian counseling. She labeled him a psychopath in 2010. Frata's retrial in May 2009 again resulted in a guilty verdict and a death sentence. His own children urged jurors to sentence him to death. The Court of Criminal Appeals affirmed the conviction in October 2011. All subsequent state and federal appeals were denied. 3 days before his execution, Frata gave a phone interview to Abraham Bonowitz of Death Penalty Action, describing death row as ridiculously tormenting and calling the system torturous. He advised people considering moving to the US that countries without the death penalty might be preferable. Frata never admitted involvement in Farah's murder during his 27 years on death row. His final appeals challenged Texas' use of expired pentobarbital for lethal injection. The TDCJ stated that the drugs were potency tested, and the state dismissed claims of pain as speculative. Frata's lawyers filed civil cases to halt the executions, but the Court of Criminal Appeals and Texas Supreme Court ruled that civil courts lacked jurisdiction. On the day of his execution, Bradley Baker and Farah's brother Zane Baker attended, along with crime victims advocate Andy Cahan. No witnesses attended for Frata. A spiritual advisor was present in the chamber and prayed with him before the lethal injection. Please hit that subscribe button if you like my channel. See you next time. Bye bye.